The intercom woke me up. My secretary informed me that a woman was insisting on seeing me personally and urgently. I rinsed my face and headed to my private office, glancing disdainfully at the city below me. I despised the place, even the people working on the 17 floors beneath me, despite them all being my employees. My secretary, Colette, entered without knocking, as I rarely spent time there anymore. I was now just a figurehead, staying in my penthouse with no other place to go. A young woman entered with an air of importance but looked uncomfortable in the grand surroundings. She introduced herself as June Parsons from Slow Social Services. Trying to keep things informal, she seemed out of place and unprepared for my environment. June explained that she had a case involving 2 children and a mother who had attempted to take her own life. She handed me a letter found beside the mother. The letter began with, "My dear John." I immediately recognized the handwriting, recalling an event from 11 years ago that drastically changed my life. I vividly remembered that chaotic morning. A broken water pipe on Chiswick Road caused a massive traffic jam, making me almost an hour and a half late. My secretary had surprised me by entering the office, scolding me for having my phone off and informing me that Tony Jordan had been trying to reach me. I didn't want to meet with him, as neither he nor his brother knew how to handle contracts or keep clients satisfied. Tony informed me there was a problem with Johnson's work and that I needed to fly out immediately to resolve it with their board of directors to prevent them from taking their business elsewhere. I was confident I could handle it, as I had done before. Internally, I resented Tony and his brother Robert for mismanaging the company, but I knew expressing that would put my job at risk. Tony insisted I take the noon flight because Simon Johnson had stepped down, and his nephew, Paul Johnson, was now in charge. It derailed my plans with my wife, Sally, for the theater, as the Johnson account took precedence over my personal life. I protested, saying I had a commitment with Sally, but Tony persisted, stating that she would understand the importance of the Johnson account, which represented almost half of our revenue. He even suggested calling Sally to pack my things, as there wouldn't be enough time to go home before the flight. I left his office, reflecting on how I had started working for Henry Jordan right out of college when the company was a small operation. Henry had weathered tough times during the economic downturn, saving the company while others collapsed. Henry Jordan capitalized on surplus machinery during hard times, refurbishing it and selling it at high prices to developing countries. He was a typical conservative, likely keeping profits overseas to avoid taxes. As bankruptcies dwindled, Henry shifted focus to becoming a broker for companies selling machinery tools in Europe, assembling and delivering machines across the EU. The business thrived until Henry's 2 sons, Tony and Robert, joined the company. Despite their college education, their just-in-time approach caused delays, as they didn't account for unforeseen issues in our work. Simple planning could have avoided these problems, but they insisted on tight schedules that often led to late deliveries and unhappy clients. Tony insisted I fly to New York to resolve the Johnson issue, even though it was his responsibility. I knew the board would blame me if anything went wrong, so I complied. I called Sally at the Slow factory to inform her. She also worked for Jordan & Sons, and she knew we'd be in trouble if things went badly. Sally and I had met years ago when she joined the typing team, and we married 4 months later, enjoying 10 happy years together at home. Work had been fine until Henry's sons took over, changing the dynamics of the company. Before they arrived, I was Henry's right-hand man, assisting him in everything. Their arrival changed things. Henry was a good man and didn't immediately place me beneath his sons, but they resented it. They were polite, but I knew they didn't like the influence I had over their father. Henry Jordan took the company public, reaping huge profits, but he didn't give me any shares or a directorial role. When Henry had a heart attack, he asked me to oversee his sons, but I lacked influence without shares. Henry retired and passed away 3 months later, and his sons made unwelcome changes, including moving the office to Chiswick and putting Robert in charge of the factory, with Sally as his secretary. I didn't like Sally working for Robert, suspecting jealousy or distrust between the brothers. She got along well with Robert, often defending him, which caused tension between us, especially since I traveled frequently for work. Robert spent more time with Sally, which created friction. Sally was upset, thinking I had volunteered for the trip, and made a scene. I tried to explain the urgency, but she was frustrated with my frequent absences. She arrived late at the airport, which caused her to miss the flight. As I rushed back, I caught a glimpse of her getting into a yellow Lamborghini driven by none other than Robert Jordan, though I couldn't see him clearly. My frustration boiled over. Robert couldn't make the trip to New York, but he had time to take my wife out in his flashy car. I was furious. After sitting at the airport bar for about 20 minutes, I boarded my flight. On the plane, I reviewed the contracts, noting the usual loopholes Henry had included to give us flexibility with delivery dates. But the recent contracts, handled by the Jordan brothers, had most of those helpful loopholes removed. When I landed at JFK, Paul Johnson was there to greet me along with Petra, his assistant, and a group of men. I had met Paul a few times before. He always seemed very young compared to me, though I was only about 5 years older. Usually, Simon Johnson did most of the talking, while Paul just nodded and laughed at his jokes. But Paul's overly enthusiastic welcome, along with his entourage carrying my bags to the waiting limousine, made me suspicious. "We've booked the company suite at the Waldorf," Paul said. "Simon was hoping to see you on this trip, but he's still on his world cruise. He asked me to inform you that he'll visit you when his ship docks in Southampton." I found it strange that Simon Johnson wanted to see me. Sure, we'd always gotten along, but it had always been a professional relationship. Why would he want to see me now that he was retired? Henry Jordan had always stayed at the Waldorf Astoria when he was in New York, but I usually opted for less ostentatious places. However, Paul told me the suite was the company's, so I assumed it was simply available. I couldn't imagine the Jordan brothers paying for a suite just for me. After dropping me off at the Waldorf, Paul said he'd send Petra to pick me up for dinner around 7, and then he and his entourage left. The entire trip was becoming more confusing by the minute. It should have been me inviting Paul Johnson to dinner, not the other way around. It was around 4 p.m. local time, and I wondered if Sally had gone to the theater alone since she had the tickets. I called our home number, but there was no answer. Assuming it was around 9 p.m. in London, I sent her a text asking if she was enjoying the play and who she had gone with. When Petra came to pick me up, I was still on the phone, but there was no response from Sally, and still no answer at home. I left a message on the answering machine, saying I was going out to dinner and would call her the next day. As I was about to leave, Petra took my briefcase and placed it back where she had picked it up. "Tonight is just for socializing, John. Paul wants you to meet his family," Petra mentioned. "What's going on?" I asked once we were in the car. I could tell Petra was thinking about how to respond, and it took her a moment before she spoke. "Paul thinks that since you two do so much business together, you should get to know each other better. He also wants you to meet everyone on the Johnson board," she explained. None of this made much sense to me until I wondered if Johnson and Partners might be considering hiring me away from Jordan and Sons. That seemed like the only reason for all the strange behavior. The dinner was excellent, with many of Johnson's board members and their spouses present. Afterward, we went to a nightclub where some people danced. I didn't join in because I was feeling the effects of jet lag, having been awake many more hours than everyone else. As the night progressed, I became more convinced that my theory of being recruited might be correct. All the board members went out of their way to talk to me and make me feel comfortable. Petra stayed close, almost acting as my personal assistant. Whenever someone approached me, she quietly told me who they were and any important details about them. Around 2 a.m. New York time, 7 a.m. in London, I returned to my room. There were no messages on my phone, and the hotel reception said Sally hadn't left any messages either. I considered calling her but decided it was too early, given that she had been out late the night before. I was startled awake at 11 a.m. by Petra bringing breakfast and informing me of my schedule. "You have a board meeting at noon, followed by a round of golf with Paul. We'll take a helicopter to SJ's estate right after. Paul also wants to know if you're in a hurry to return to London. That depends on what Paul and the board decide about our delays. I'm sure they'll agree with what I say, they trust you, but hurry up. You don't want to be late for the meeting, Petra said nervously before quickly leaving. I tried calling Sally, but she wasn't in her office. The temporary receptionist didn't recognize my voice and didn't ask questions, but she didn't know where Sally was. On a hunch, I asked for Robert Jordan, but he wasn't there either. Frustrated, I called Tony Jordan at the Chiswick office, pretending I needed clarification on a contract. Tony took longer than necessary to respond. Oh, I think Robert's in Brighton today, meeting with the directors of Carter Industries. He took Sally to take notes, you know how Robert's memory is. Liar. That contract had been finalized last week. What was he trying to pull? That was just a thought, not something I said out loud. After Tony asked how things were going, I told him I might need a few more days to resolve things. As soon as I hung up, I called Mandy Carter's secretary in Brighton. As I suspected, she confirmed that no meetings were scheduled with Robert that day and couldn't recall them ever meeting. Petra returned and urged me to hurry up and get ready for the conference. So, I quickly finished my breakfast and jumped in the shower. We arrived a little late, but it seemed like no one had noticed. We began with a series of presentations and a tour of the offices, not reaching the conference room until nearly 1 p.m. I have to admit, my negotiations felt like a joke. Everyone agreed with everything I said and seemed more concerned about whether I was upset. It seemed like everyone was on my side regarding how useless and annoying the Jordan brothers were, although no one said it directly. I thought they were preparing to make me a big offer, but I was surprised that nothing of the sort happened. After the meeting, Paul, some other directors, and I went to the rooftop to take the helicopter. As usual, Petra accompanied us. She asked when I wanted to return to England and arranged a flight for later that day. On the golf course, I used my mobile to call my secretary in Chiswick and told her I would stay a few more days, wanting everyone to think I was still out of the country. Petra overheard me and noticed my tension, expressing her concern. She asked if something was wrong, noticing my unease when calling England. I mentioned my suspicions of a possible problem at home, hinting at personal issues. Petra assured me of her confidentiality and offered to help keep my return a secret so I could catch them in the act if my suspicions were correct. Petra understood the urgency and promised to handle any calls from England, ensuring no one knew I was flying back that night. She assured me that, besides Paul, she was the only one who knew about my return and would delay anyone trying to contact me. As we spoke, I noticed Paul approaching. Petra subtly signaled him and redirected him to talk with the other players, allowing me to make my calls in private. After the game, we went to SJ's mansion for dinner, where I saw SJ's daughter, Beatrix, again. I noticed something was off. I had known Bea for years, but she seemed uncomfortable around me that day. I couldn't figure out what was wrong, but I felt they knew something I didn't. I started to worry that telling Petra about my suspicions might have been a mistake. We flew back to the company's headquarters that same day in the helicopter, and then Petra took me to the airport. She had arranged for someone to pick up my things from the Waldorf Astoria. The flight back to Heathrow was quiet, but once we landed, an assistant met me at the arrivals area and directed me to a service phone for an urgent call. "John, it's Petra. We had everyone waiting for you on the phone last night after you left. Your wife called, and I told her you were in a meeting with Paul. Later, both Johnsons called separately, and I gave them the same message. Your wife called again, asking when you'd be home. I told her you were booked on the Saturday night flight. Is that okay? Thanks, Petra. That should work. I'll call them from my mobile later and tell them the same. I appreciate your help. Keep me posted if anyone calls here again." So, my wife had called and seemed worried about where I was. I wondered why she suddenly cared so much. I booked a room at the Novotel near the airport and found out that they had already delivered the car I requested from New York. Since the company had an account with the hotel, it was the easiest option, but the car was booked under my personal name. Not feeling tired, I decided to swing by my house. Sally's car was in the driveway, and the house was dark. It was just after 4 a.m., so this was to be expected. I called the house phone from a payphone at the end of our street, but there was no answer, and the answering machine picked up. I called 4 times, and since no one answered, I assumed Sally wasn't home. I left the car where it was and walked to the house. After entering quietly and quickly checking the place, I confirmed it was empty. I decided the best thing to do was wait for Sally to return. I made a pot of coffee and settled into the living room. I hoped the coffee would keep me awake, but it didn't. The loud sound of the Lamborghini's engine woke me up a little before 8 a.m. From the window, I saw Sally and Robert getting out of the yellow car and walking toward the house. "Come in, Bobby. I'll take a quick shower and get dressed. Go to the kitchen and make some coffee, will you? I need something to clear my head." It was strange that neither of them noticed me sitting in the living room, even though the door was wide open. I guess some people just don't see what they don't expect. Sally ran upstairs while Robert headed for the kitchen. I could hear him rummaging through the cupboards and then calling up to Sally, "Where's your coffee maker?" "It's on the counter," she responded from upstairs. "I can't find it," he replied. Sally came downstairs, saying, "You men are useless without a good woman to help you." She entered the kitchen, continuing, "That's odd, it should be on the counter. I don't think I left it in there. Oh my God, what are you doing here?" Sally had entered the living room, looking for the coffee maker, and finally noticed me. She was wearing only a tiny bra and a thong, neither of which I had seen before. I was just sitting there, waiting for my supposedly faithful wife. Now, I thought I was going to punch that idiot in the face. I stood up from my chair. Both Robert and Sally froze for a moment, thinking I was still in the U.S. Then Robert reacted and tried to flee. Unfortunately for him, our front door had a tricky night latch with a complicated lever. The more he pulled and tugged, the more panicked he became. I slammed him against the door and gave him a beating. It seemed like he didn't even know how to defend himself. Sally was screaming that it wasn't what it looked like and tried to pull me off Robert. I don't think I hit him as much as I wanted to. Honestly, I'm not a violent person by nature. When he tried to curl up on the floor, I stopped hitting him. I'm sure others would have kicked him while he was down, but I couldn't do it. I turned the lock the right way, opened the door, and shoved him outside. Without thinking much, I grabbed Sally as well and pushed her out too, slamming the door behind them. I headed to the living room, this time straight for the liquor cabinet. Sally called and rang the doorbell for a while. From the window, I saw Robert go back to the car and return with a travel blanket, probably to cover Sally since she was barely dressed. Sally started yelling through the mail slot, insisting that it wasn't what it seemed and begging me to let her in. I refused to engage, so I ignored her. Some neighbors had begun watching from their doors and yards. Sally must have realized I was back in the living room because she started pounding on one of the living room windows, still shouting for me to let her in. Unfortunately, she hit the window too hard just as the police arrived. The window shattered, and Sally severely cut her arm on the glass. It seemed like only moments later when paramedics and an ambulance showed up. I guess the police had called them, not me. A policeman knocked on the door and spoke briefly with Sally and Robert before approaching me. After explaining my side of the story, I told him I had found my wife with another man in my house. The officer noted that the man claimed I had hit him, which I confirmed, adding that I hadn't touched my wife, just shown her the door. Another officer, who had been talking to Sally and Robert, indicated that neither of them wanted to press charges and that there was no violence involved. However, Sally had a serious cut on her arm that required stitches and clothes for the hospital. I refused to provide any, suggesting her boyfriend could buy her something new. As the Lamborghini followed the ambulance, I mentioned that I needed to call a window repair service and my lawyer. The officers left, hoping not to return. My lawyer connected me with his colleague who handles divorces. She said she would start the process but couldn't do much until she knew who Sally's lawyer would be. It all depended on how Sally wanted to handle things. I noticed the police passing by several times that morning as I placed Sally's clothes, which I had packed in garbage bags, in the garage. I assumed there must have been some arrangement between the police and Sally. They probably told her I had put her things in the garage. Around 4 p.m., another police car arrived, this time with only one officer who stayed inside the car. Shortly after, a Ford Transit van driven by one of the guys from the factory pulled up and reversed into my driveway. I opened the garage door with the remote and saw what was happening. Sally, with her arm in a sling, got out of the passenger seat along with a woman from her office. As the man and woman loaded Sally's belongings into the van, I heard Sally try to open the service door between the garage and the kitchen. When she found it was locked, she walked around and rang the front doorbell. John, we need to talk. You're wrong, nothing happened between Robert and me. John, I know you're in there, please, let's talk. You're making a big mistake, Sally pleaded through the mail slot. I opened the door just enough to shove her purse into her hand, then slammed it shut. I had already removed her credit cards and house keys. I watched Sally talk with the police officer, who had gotten out of his car by then. He just shrugged and shook his head. After a while, he pointed to a spot on the ground, probably telling Sally and her friends where to wait. Then he walked up and knocked on the door. Your wife wants to speak with you, sir. You can't just leave her outside, he said when I opened the door. Tell her there's nothing to discuss. The house is going on the market because I've decided it's no longer our home. If it were, she would have been here last night instead of with her boyfriend. Tell her that her lawyer can contact mine, they know who they are. The officer returned to the driveway and had a brief but animated conversation with Sally and her friends. Sally then seemed to collapse into her friend's arms, who helped her back to the van. They left, and the officer watched as the garage door slowly closed. He shrugged at one of the neighbors who had been watching and then returned to his car and drove off. About an hour later, Petra called. I told her everything that had happened, and she expressed her sympathy. She asked what I planned to do next, and I told her I was divorcing Sally and couldn't continue working for the Jordans. Petra insisted I stay in touch and made me promise I would. She also mentioned that Simon Johnson would contact me and that I should keep in touch so Paul could find me. Paul had already mentioned this. I wondered why Simon Johnson's visit was so important. I didn't return to the Novotel until midnight. I couldn't stand being in that house again, it held too many painful memories. The next morning, after breakfast, I called my secretary to ask if Tony was in the office. She told me he wouldn't be coming in that day and asked what was going on. I explained everything. She was really upset by the news. I think she was crying while we spoke. She told me that Tony had hinted he might resign when I returned. I felt like he was staying away from the office to avoid being there when I showed up. Tony's absence was strange. I thought he would enjoy seeing me go, especially after I had fought with his brother Robert. As one of the company's directors, there was no love lost between us. Nothing made sense. The whole situation was confusing. First, my trip to New York, Tony had insisted I go, but when I arrived, everyone at Johnson seemed surprised to see me. Sure, there had been some late deliveries, but they didn't seem too concerned. Then there was Robert chasing after Sally. Sure, she's attractive, but Robert usually dated younger women. Sally was at least 5 years older than him and nearly 10 years older than his typical partners. Maybe they had fallen for each other after working together for so long, but I doubted Robert would do that. I went to the office to pick up my personal belongings. While I was there, I wiped the hard drive of my company computer and laptop, but only after copying everything to disks. I handed in my resignation letter, which my secretary had prepared for me, directly to the personnel officer. While I waited, she arranged for my final salary and bonuses to be deposited into my bank account immediately. The accounts department was hesitant at first, but they changed their minds once they realized who was resigning. Almost everyone in the office helped me move my things to the rental car or came out to say goodbye. I had left my company car securely locked in the garage at the house, wanting to ensure I received everything owed to me before returning it. That was practically everything. I stayed at the Novotel for a week while I looked for an apartment. The house sold quickly because it was in a good neighborhood, and I priced it to sell fast. As for work, I decided to take a few months off to think about my next steps. I was still hoping Johnson would make me an offer, so I didn't want to commit to anything else too soon. As for Sally, I saw her a couple of times, and both encounters ended in heated arguments. In fact, both times I called her a little cheater, and she reacted angrily. We couldn't have a civilized conversation. I was surprised she didn't move in with Robert right away. It wasn't until several months after I kicked her out that she did. I'm not sure where she stayed in the meantime, but the guy I hired to watch her said she moved in with Robert right after our first big argument in the lawyer's office. The situation got so intense that they almost had to call the police. Sally probably realized then that there was no chance of reconciliation. Our second big argument occurred when we signed the divorce papers. Sally, looking strange, sat at the table wearing a big winter coat and seemed uncomfortable. My lawyer and I sat across from her as the details of the settlement were read out. After she signed the papers, they were placed in front of me, and just as I was about to sign, she asked, "Are you really sure you want to do this? There are some things you need to." I interrupted, asking my lawyer, "Did I just hear a little cheater say something?" Sally erupted in anger, calling me names, so I quickly signed the papers and left without saying another word. As I mentioned, I didn't want to get into a shouting match with her. A few weeks, maybe a month, after the divorce was finalized, Petra called to inform me that Simon Johnson would be arriving in Southampton that weekend. I made plans to meet him at a hotel in town. After the usual pleasantries, Simon and his wife talked to me about their cruise. I couldn't shake the feeling that Simon was up to something, though he was just a long-time client. He acted like an old friend. We exchanged condolences over Henry's death, and he expressed regret about what had happened between Sally and me. He mentioned that he was sorry he hadn't acted sooner but had to respect Henry's wishes. That's when I realized he had been avoiding the real issue. Things became clearer when Bea entered the room. She greeted me with a hug and a kiss on the cheek before handing Simon a briefcase. After that, she and Simon's wife left. Once Simon opened the briefcase, he said, "All right, John, let's get to the point. What did you think when Henry took the company public and didn't give you any shares?" I wasn't sure how to respond. "Well, it was his company, and he could do what he wanted with his money," I said. "But you helped him build it. From what I know of Henry, you probably went the extra mile for him more than once." I didn't reply, thinking he would get to the point soon. "Did you know that Henry owned a large portion of Johnson's through offshore holding companies? Those same companies also own a significant stake in Jordan's." This was new to me, but I decided it was best to stay quiet and listen to what Simon had to say. "Tell me, what did Henry say to you when he retired?" "He knew his time was short. He asked me to try to keep his sons in check, but since I wasn't on the board, there wasn't much I could do." "Yes. I regret to say this, but Henry did that on purpose. He expected the boys to ruin the company within a year and didn't want you to be involved in any of it. He feared they might try to blame you. You know that if a company collapses due to mismanagement, its directors can be disqualified from holding other directorships, right?" I nodded. He thought the boys would drain the company's resources quickly. "These papers," Simon said, placing a stack of documents on the table, "make you the principal shareholder of those holding companies. Essentially, they're yours now." He paused to let that sink in before continuing, "And these papers detail all of Henry's numbered bank accounts. I was supposed to hold on to them until Jordan and Sons failed, but given what the brothers did to you, I think you should have them now." Did you know that, according to their father's will, the brothers couldn't fire you? Oh, I see you didn't know that. I suspect they set you up, you and Sally, to force you to quit. Simon leaned back and looked at me. You're a very wealthy man now, though all your money is in offshore accounts. So you'll have to figure out how to bring it back into the country legally. I can help with that, I have some creative accountants. My thoughts were spinning. He had just told me that Robert Jordan had seduced Sally and ruined my life just to push me out of the company. But why? You seem angry, and I understand why, Simon continued. Henry never really believed the boys were his. Marta had a habit of cheating on him while he was away. He had DNA tests done years ago. At one point, he thought one of them might be his biological son, but he eventually came to believe they knew he wasn't their real father and talked badly about him behind his back. Henry always said you were more like a son to him, so he decided you would inherit all his money. He thought the boys would destroy the company. I suppose you want them to go bankrupt and ruined, just like Henry did. But what about the employees at Jordan's? They'll lose their jobs. No. A big U.S. company is taking over. Do you see Henry's plan now, John? Johnson's will cancel its contracts with Jordan's in the next week or so. Then, shortly after, some foreign shareholders will dump a ton of Jordan stock on the London Stock Exchange, which will cause the stock price to plummet. The right bank officials will be notified, and they'll call in the company's loans. Then a group will step in and buy what's left of the company from the banks. Can you guess who will lead that group and be the principal shareholder? Simon smiled. But no one will know that part. Then you can renegotiate the contracts with Johnson's. Maybe eventually you'll invite me to join your board. A merger between Johnson's and Jordan's could even put you on the Johnson's board too. How does that sound, John? I don't understand why Henry didn't leave me the company from the start. He must have known I'd be dealing with legal challenges to the will for years. You were with Henry nearly every day during his last years, and you know he was a bit eccentric. He thought the family would claim you had too much influence over him. They also suspected he had hidden money overseas and spent a lot of time and money searching for it. That's why Henry left everything in my care. Anyone who investigates where your money comes from will find it came from me. Plus, since I'm no longer with Johnson and Partners, they can't accuse us of insider trading. And I've been on that damn boat for the last 6 months. So, here's where things stand now. I'm the co-chairman of Simon Johnson Associates. I've left Paula in charge of the U.S. branch while I oversee operations in Europe. The Jordan brothers declared bankruptcy and are banned from being company directors for 10 years. They've tried to get back into business a few times, but I had people watching them. Their marriage didn't last more than a year. Honestly, I felt sorry for the twins Sally had with him. I assumed they met in the office after I kicked her out since the person I hired to watch her said they rarely saw each other at night. I doubt Robert ever paid child support after leaving her. One wonders about these things. I kept thinking about how long Robert had been involved with Sally. She must have gotten pregnant quickly after our separation. I saw her pushing a stroller down Slow Road exactly a year after I threw her out. The last I heard of Robert, he was living somewhere in southern Spain with a shady crowd. I looked into it. Southern Spain is near Morocco, and I'm sure he was using speedboats to get around, which is why I tipped off the authorities. As for Tony, apparently, he's driving buses in London, not the best job. His wife divorced him after finding out about his affair. I'm sure you can guess who told her. Tony's mother, Martha, now lives with him. I feel a little guilty about Martha losing her income from Jordan and Sons. The real question is whether Martha felt any guilt for cheating on Henry. You reap what you sow. The last I heard, she was living in council housing in Slough, probably relying on social benefits. Maybe she's doing something on the side. Sorry, that was a harsh thought, but that's how I feel. Things started moving quickly once we got going. Paul and I made a great team, we were both trained by top professionals. Henry Jordan trained me, and Simon Johnson trained Paul. In the following years, we acquired many other companies. Merging our companies turned us into a large multinational corporation. Now, Paul and I have taken a step back and let our teams handle most of the work. Simon Johnson and his wife settled in England. He bought a beautiful estate right next to mine. His daughter, B, and I spend time together, but we're not planning on getting married. We've both been there before. B is on the board with Paul, Petra, and me, and we all get along well. As for Petra, she ended up marrying Paul. His wife had died in a car accident years ago, and Paul and Petra got together after much hesitation. Paul jokes that Petra only married him because she got tired of waiting for me to propose. You might wonder why I'm living alone in this penthouse. Something is missing from my life ever since, well, you know. Now, I just take it one day at a time. If a good investment opportunity comes up, I'll take it. But there has to be more to life than just making money now. A social worker just handed me a letter from Sally. I read it quickly and then used the intercom on my desk. Colette, can you find out if Beatrix is in the building and ask her to come here as soon as possible? Yes, sir, I think she's in her office. I saw her earlier and haven't seen her leave. B arrived at my door a few minutes later. I handed her the letter without saying a word. As she read it, she breathed deeply, showing she was upset by what she was reading. That evil woman. Did you know about this? No, not at all. What are you going to do? I don't have any other option here, B. I turned to June Parsons and asked, what hospital is Sally in? She's at the General Hospital in Slough, June replied. And what's her condition? When I visited her last night, they didn't have much information. She had taken a mixture of pills, practically everything she had at home. They managed to pump her stomach, but they're not sure how long she was unconscious. The doctor said it would be a while before we know more. And the kids? I asked. I placed them with an emergency foster mother last night. She's taking care of them today. I wanted to consult with you about what you want to do. I'll need that note back if she doesn't survive. The coroner will need to see it. All right, I'll make a copy for myself and give the original back to Miss Parsons. Colette, get me the general manager of Slough General Hospital on the line right away, I said, using the intercom again. Soon, the phone rang. Hello, yes, do you know who I am? I have a question for you. How far over budget is your hospital this year? After a brief pause, I continued, very well. Here's the situation, you have a patient named Sally, what's her last name, June? Sally Crawford, June Parsons answered. Right. You have a patient named Sally Crawford who is in for a drug overdose. If she survives, I'll send a check for £1 million to your hospital. If she doesn't, you won't get anything. Understood? Good. I expect no expense to be spared and no corners to be cut. Goodbye. Are you sure they're doing all they can? B asked. I don't trust the bureaucrats running our hospitals these days. They often try to cut costs. I just have my doubts sometimes. Anyway, offering £1 million should guarantee Sally gets the best care possible. Agreed. Now, let's go pick up my kids. I assume that's why you're here, June. Well, Mrs. Crawford says in the letter that they're your children. I don't see any issue with transferring their care to you for now, but until a judge decides otherwise, they remain my responsibility. Don't worry, they'll be well taken care of, and I'll keep you updated on their condition. With your permission, we'll take them to my house near Swindon. There will be plenty for them to do until we know more about Sally. We can easily drive on the motorway in about an hour to visit her. I'm glad you think that way, Mr. Crawford. Let's keep things as they are with you in June. I'm sure the kids will feel more comfortable if we keep things familiar. The three of us headed to the underground parking lot. Miss Parsons joined B and me in the back of my limousine for the drive to Slough. Our first stop was the hospital to see Sally. The doctors were reluctant to say much at this early stage. Then June took us to the foster home where the children were. Bea and I waited in the car while she spoke with them alone. After about 10 minutes, June motioned for us to enter, and Bea came in with Kai and Geeter. "This is your Uncle John. He will take care of you until your mother recovers," June introduced. We decided to use the title Uncle John until we knew more about Sally's condition and how the girls would adjust to me. "Hi, girls. This is my friend, Beatrix. You can call her Aunt Bea," I said. The 10-year-old girls looked at us with some suspicion. "You'll stay with me at my country house while your mom gets better. There are horses to ride and a pool there," Bea added. "Where is our mom? Can we see her?" Kai asked. "Is she going to die?" Geeter added. "The doctors are doing everything they can to help her," I said. The girls still seemed unsure. "We saw her earlier, but if you want, we can go to the hospital so you can see how hard they're working to help her get better." "They may not let the children see her," June noted. "I'm sure they will let these kids see their mother." "Just remember the situation," I responded. We dropped June off at the station where she had left her car. Then we headed to the hospital. As I expected, the rules were adjusted to allow the girls to enter the ICU. Surprisingly, the girls didn't cry as I had anticipated. They were quite resilient. Bea also noticed a strong resemblance to me. I decided to skip the DNA tests. The ride to Wiltshire was pretty smooth. Once the girls felt comfortable in the limousine, they started exploring everything inside. They were excited about the idea of watching TV while traveling down the highway. As we were getting off the motorway, Geeter turned to me and asked, "You're our dad, aren't you?" I saw no reason to deny it. "Yes, I am. But I didn't know until today. If I had known, I would have seen you more often." "We know. Mom told us last week." "She never told you about us?" "No, I didn't know what she was planning. She told us she was bad to you and didn't tell you that we were your daughters. She said you thought her other husband was our dad," Geeter explained. "That's right. Maybe one day your mom will explain why she did what she did." "Do you think she'll get better?" Kai asked. "I really hope so. She doesn't want to get better. She wants to go to heaven," Geeter said. "I can't believe that, not with two wonderful girls like you," Bea responded. "Mom is tired. She works too hard, and there's never enough money." "Well, now there will be enough money, and she won't have to work anymore. Do you see that little house?" I said as the car was pulling into my estate. "When she recovers, I'll ask your mom if she'd like to live in that house. You two can ride horses and swim in the pool at the big house." The girls' eyes grew wide as they gazed at the mansion where the car had stopped. The household staff quickly came down to greet them. I knew they had prepared everything for the girls' arrival, setting up a guest room with 2 twin beds. Bea and I were somewhat forgotten as the staff took care of the girls and led them away. "Well, that's a surprise," Bea said. "I wonder why Sally never told you they were yours." "Sally must have gone to great lengths to hide her pregnancy from me. Now that I think about it, she might have been showing signs during our last meeting when we signed the divorce papers. She was sitting hunched over in a long coat on a warm day. I remember thinking it was strange for her to wear that coat. I wonder why she hated you so much after all. She was the one who cheated on you. What did she expect when you found out she was with that jerk? You'll have to ask her if she survives." The girls adapted well, and the staff went out of their way to care for them. 2 weeks later, I entered Sally's hospital room. She had finally woken up with a clear mind for the first time the night before. I placed the letter she had left in her hand and waited for her to wake up. I must have fallen asleep while waiting because the first thing I heard her say was, "Hi, John. I'm sorry." I looked at her and saw her holding the letter. "How are my girls?" "They're fine. I left them at the pool this morning. They're keeping my staff very busy. They're lovely girls and a real credit to you. B will bring them here this afternoon. Thank you. I'm sorry I kept them from you. It was foolish to do it out of anger. Once I did it, I didn't know how to undo it. Well, I can't think of a worse way to handle it than the way you did. I was desperate, you know. I owe thousands of pounds that I can't repay. Robert left me with so much debt by making me sign for everything. I think he married me because, being bankrupt, he couldn't get credit. You don't have any debts now, Sally. I've paid them all off, and those lenders you borrowed from are out of business for good. Oh, you found out about them? It wasn't hard. They showed up at your apartment demanding money while one of my employees was picking up the rest of the girls' things. He told them to come back later, and they were in for a big surprise. They won't bother you anymore. Why are you being so kind to me? The last time we saw each other, you. That was a long time ago, Sally, and I was still hurt then. Now, it's just a painful memory. Though it did hurt to read your letter, it will take me a long time to forgive you for keeping my girls away from me. I'm sorry. That's all I can say. Well, as for the girls, they know we're friends now. Tomorrow, if you agree, we'll move you to my house. I've arranged for a couple of nurses to take care of you there. Once you're fully recovered, you and the girls can live in one of the houses on the estate. That way, I'll be able to see them often. You're not going to take the girls away from me, are you? I'm not going to take their mother away from them. They love you very much, maybe even more than they love me. But I'll make sure you never keep me away from them again. I'm sorry. That's all I keep saying, but I truly regret all the mistakes I've made. There's one question I need to ask you, Sally. Why did you get involved with that jerk in the first place? Don't you think I've asked myself that question 1,000 times over the last 10 years? I'm not sure I have a clear answer. He worked on me very carefully over a long period. I know why he did it. He told me when he realized the girls weren't his. It didn't take him long, they looked so much like you. They couldn't fire you because of their father's will, but they were convinced you had some of his money. They thought you might use it to start your own business if you lost your job. They had private detectives watching me. Did you know Robert charged almost everything to the company? We had nothing, no house, no car, nothing. Robert and Tony were arrested for embezzling from the company, but I have a feeling you were behind that. No, the law took its course without my help. But Robert and Tony were taking outrageous salaries. What did they do with all their money? I'm not sure. They both liked to gamble on the stock market, and Robert spent money like water at clubs. He also liked to bet. I think they had spent everything by the time they decided to push you out of the company. They were hoping you'd reveal where you thought Henry had hidden the money. You still haven't explained why you got involved with that jerk. Well, I was angry at you. Robert was very manipulative. He deceived me the whole time. Every time you were away, he'd drop little hints, letting me overhear things that made me think you had girlfriends all over the place. It's hard to explain, but I overheard him talking to Tony about expenses for nightclubs and other things. I'm sure they were legitimate business expenses, but it was the little comments Robert made to Tony over the phone, things I wasn't supposed to hear but did, like how you had a new girl in New York or Rome and how much you spent on her. If you knew he was deceiving you, why didn't you confront me? Because I couldn't believe it. If I had confronted you and it turned out to be true, what would I have done then? I wasn't as strong as you. I don't think I could have left and divorced you. I would have ended up miserable. But over time, I started to doubt myself. Then came that play, you know I wanted you to take me to see it. Well, Robert was there when you called to say you were going to New York. He heard our conversation. When I started crying, he comforted me, then took me home to pack your suitcase and drive you to the airport. We didn't go back to work. Robert said I was too upset. We went to the river in Seidel and talked all afternoon. After that, he took me to dinner and to the play that night. I think I drank too much. I know that's not an excuse, but that night, I ended up sleeping with him. I'm sure I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't been drinking, but it's easy to say that now. I was very depressed, and Robert made me feel better that day. After all, my supposedly loving husband had just flown off to see his girlfriend, or so I thought. I kept believing that until Robert left me. Then he told me everything about how they had planned it. If you hadn't come home that day, they were going to send you photos of Robert and me together anonymously. I knew it was wrong to sleep with Robert. If it's any consolation, he wasn't very good in bed. Too selfish. I don't want to hear that. Sorry. But he was bad at almost everything, except hitting me. He got quite good at that toward the end. When I came back and found you and Robert together, I was angry. I'm not sure why, but I felt like you had set me up. Petra told me you wouldn't be home until Sunday. That little stuttering Petra. Yes, Petra. She was convinced you had a girlfriend in New York. Well, she wasn't. Don't you think I know that now? But I thought you had set me up to catch me and divorce me. That made me so angry. I guess I was really mad at myself. I was planning to tell you about the twins the day we signed the divorce papers. My idea was to sign the papers first, then, before you signed, inform you about the babies. That way, it wouldn't seem like I was using them to get you to change your mind and take me back. You'd have the choice to sign or not. But you were still angry with me. I should have realized then that you weren't cheating on me. If you had been, you wouldn't have been so upset about my actions. Instead, you called me a horrible name, and I lost my temper. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. What's done is done, and nothing can change it. Will you ever forgive me? Forgive you? That's a hard question. I might eventually forgive you, but I'll never forget. However, now there are two wonderful young girls involved, and we need to think about them. I'll be kind to you, and I hope you'll do the same for their sake. You're their mother, and I'll be their loving father. Just don't bring any boyfriends near my house. There will never be boyfriends. Never. Never is a long time, Sally. Sally eventually recovered and lived in the small house on the estate with the girls until they went to college. She passed away from cancer a few years ago. I think she didn't have the strength to fight fully. I believe the pills from her overdose caused lasting damage. Bea and I ended up getting married. We love each other, but I don't think I love Beatrix the same way I loved Sally. Bea and I are more like soulmates, we care deeply for each other and enjoy being together. I suppose it's love, but it's different from what I had with Sally. The twins are now adults and married with children of their own. Bea is known as Grandma, a role she feels she's too young to embrace. Am I happy now? It's a mix of yes and no. I wish I had spent my life with the woman I loved. Now, all I can do is lay flowers on her grave. Every Sunday, Bea waits for me at the cemetery gate while I do that. Life goes on.